Well, Ben Sasse, who is stepping down from his job as president of the University of Florida, is holding on to his big paycheck. Sasse, who announced his resignation last month because of his wife's health problems, will still be paid $1 million a year until February of 2028, unless he resigns or changes jobs. His contract states that he can continue to draw the big salary because of his continuing responsibilities with the university, including serving as president emeritus, professor, and an external advisor to the Board of Trustees. Sasse has faced criticism for lavish spending during his 2-year tenure. A student-run newspaper found that in his first year as president, the university spent $17 million. That's $11 million more than the year before. Also, Sasse reportedly hired many of his former staff members from his time as a U.S. Senator. They were paid much larger salaries than the people they replaced and were able to work from home in places like Washington, D.C. So, Devron, can the can the university trustees defend this $1 million salary for the next 4 years?
You know, last time I was on the show, I think we were talking about Palestine. 2 times ago, we were talking about Palestine, and I used Ben Sasse's letter. I'm a big Ben Sasse fan. I think he's a good guy. I think this was a huge mistake. I think this happens a lot of times. People get in positions of power, and they tend to overcompensate or try to get their folks in place. Me being on FAMU's board, St. Pete College, and Bethune-Cookman in the state of Florida, I get it. But at the same time, I think you have to be able to control spend. This is the taxpayers' dollars, and we have to be very careful about how we spend the taxpayers' dollars, and we have to be mindful that, you know, folks are struggling, as Maya said earlier, very much struggling in the state of Florida to make ends meet, and we're spending $7.2 million to hire consultants. The salary, I can't argue with, because we have done it for so long with so many universities in the state of Florida. I mean, even at our own university at FAMU, Dr. Robinson will be going on sabbatical for a year. He'll get paid his normal salary, and then he'll come back to the research department and be a distinguished professor. That is kind of the norm for that position. And it was negotiated. I mean, I wish the board would, had done something different, but in this particular case, I don't think you can argue with the fact that he's going to be paid that, unless they want to do something different or the legislature wants to do something different. But if you look over history and in time, Rob, this is something that has been typically done with presidents.
Carlos, what do you think about this?
I think we certainly can argue about whether these exorbitant government salaries for these Republican appointees is an appropriate use of taxpayer money. Whether it's these lucrative government salaries, whether it's a right-wing takeover of Disney like happened a couple years ago, or whether it's the plan we just discussed to pave over our state parks with golf courses. Everywhere you look in the DeSantis administration, his corrupt cronies are using government to enrich themselves. And this is just the latest in a long list of Republican appointees in government positions in Florida that are just making absurd amounts of money. Look at Richard Corcoran over in New College, who's basically managing an institution that has the student population of a local middle school, and yet he's making over $1 million in salary and benefits. They're just using government to enrich themselves. It has to stop, and I know that there's some accountability that needs to come in the next legislative session.
All right, so how do you do that accountability? Is it up to the legislature to look into these salaries?
Well, absolutely. And what the legislature should stop doing, which I think they're in a position to do next session, is to stop rubber stamping these appointments. You know, in the Florida Senate, we actually do confirm many of these government appointees. We need to have more oversight. And as we see, Governor DeSantis is continuing to lose his clout with this Republican supermajority in Tallahassee, which may change after the November elections. I think we're going to see more of that accountability.
Okay, I want to hear from everybody, but Devron, respond to what Carlos just said.
I would just respond to that by saying you can't say that it's all Republicans. I mean, I don't think Larry Robinson was a Republican. So this is a problem in the university system as a whole. It's a contracts issue.
Are we we overpaying our presidents?
We may be overpaying them, but let's not get caught up on saying it's a Republican issue. It is an issue of contracts.
Stanley and then Maya.
Well, I think it's an issue. There's two issues. I do believe that there is a taint of republicanism in this, but I think there's a bigger problem, and I do think our legislation is not doing their job. I mean, just to give you an example, you look at New Tampa, they have New College, they have under 900 students, and he gets paid 900, his base pay is 900,000. You look at FAM, they have under 8,000 students, his base pay is 400. Again, equity needs to be into this, okay?
Something
Now
wrong
there needs to be some kind of like a range, a salary range based upon the size of the school, the colleges within the universities, but right now it seems to be very subjective. And when you're subjective, you can kind of lend to titles to whatever you want to, a Republican problem, Democratic problem.
Maya, let's bring you in on this. What do you think?
You know, I think it's interesting that we are framing this in terms of partisanship, because we wouldn't be here having this conversation about university presidents, but for the fact that we changed how university presidents and the selection process actually takes place in the state of Florida. So yes, folks like Dr. Robinson and folks who have advanced degrees who are qualified to serve in these positions, we haven't had this analysis or questioned whether or not they should get these salaries previously, but for the fact that the governor and his Republican cadre changed the process, made it a shadow process to make sure that Ben Sasse, a senator for somewhere else, to come down and lead the University of Florida. So this is a problem that I think we wouldn't be here but for the fact that this is partisanship.
And there, as you said, there's much more secrecy in the process of selecting these college presidents than there has been before.